Hello everyone and welcome to Kiran Yoga. Well, it's a difficult podcast today yet again. The Ashtanga world has been somewhat rocked by the recent allegations, the recent public unveiling of another scenario of abuse from an Ashtanga teacher. And really, we're doing a good job of destroying the Ashtanga world together, aren't we? And it's really unfortunate, but it's more than unfortunate because it's not luck. The unfortunateness seems to suggest that there's it's a chance of fate or one kind of bad egg, as it were, spoiling it for everyone. But it's more than that, unfortunately. So I'm not really in the business here of pointing fingers or capitalizing on anyone's bad behavior, as it were. But rather I want to talk about solutions, really. I want to talk about solutions. And to that end, we have to get a little bit apparently soul-searching or even negative in terms of looking at the Ashtanga method and saying, well, there's some pretty deep fault lines there. It's like when I first heard of San Andreas Fault, the fault line that runs around San Francisco, Los Angeles area, I believe, in the US. People will tell me exactly where, hopefully. And I thought, why would anyone live anywhere near such a fault line if sooner or later it's going to go off? And similarly, I kind of, in the recent years, have felt the same about recommending people go to the Ashtanga so-and-so when they go to visit a city. They go, I'm going to so-and-so city. And I've looked up and there's a Mysore, so-and-so and a Mysore, and I'm worried. I'm worried about them going there because of what they might encounter. And it's almost an inherent fault line run through Ashtanga from the early days when we have Pattabhi Jois calling people out for being bad man, bad lady, and this kind of punishing spirit that we kind of felt slightly inherent in the early days in Mysore teaching. But really, my feeling with the Jois era was that there was a lightness of touch as well. It wasn't like, I'm sure some people will have a different experience there in the early days, but it wasn't so much of a shaming and blaming and this kind of ethos that we've got into the West. It's like we tend to go to India and we take a way that we perceive things happening there, say in Mysore, and we bring them back home and we give them a Western spin. And in the way that it was done by Pattabhi Jois, and it's sometimes Charat as well in later days, in Mysore, was that there was a lightness of touch or a kind of tongue-in-cheek way of calling people out or calling them bad man, bad lady. And again, I'm sure that some teachers there will have a different opinion of that. And they will say, well, there was, an inherent problem from the very beginning. And certainly I believe there was an inherent problem with the spirit and culture of adjustments that was propagated by Pattabhi Jois from the very beginning. But in the whole context or general kind of vibe of Ashtanga in the early days, I felt that it set a fault line, although the real deepening of that fault line in its truest results was through translation, a somewhat mistranslation of that, perhaps, in the Western context when we brought the Mysore Ashtanga back home and taught it ourselves. And we tried to recreate these ideas that we felt were going on there in a Western way, which was harsh, censoring, gatekeeping, whereas Pattabhi Jois might have said, you stop there, and then the next week you got another posture. Or, he was very, very easy and flowing with the postures, handing them out, as Charat was many times in my own experience. So there wasn't this gatekeeping, there wasn't this shaming. There was abuse, of course, with Pattabhi Jois. We have to put a hand on our heart and say that. And I'm not really an apologist for Mysore in any way. And it's, again, people have had really different experiences there. So what I'm trying to say, however, is that the recent scandals with Ashtanga yoga, and I'm not going to really talk in any length, and certainly no specificity, no particular nature about these scandals or the nature of them. Basically, they were twofold, it seems. Basically, sexual abuse of students or somewhat grooming vulnerable students to have sexual encounters with that teacher. And that classic bad adjustments violent and injurious adjustment scenario, which was always been my main worry, really, in terms of recommending my students. Or, I don't even really consider the people that practice with me my students, really, because again, this whole teacher model, which was, again set in motion in the early guru disciple relationship in India, where the teacher was put on such a high pedestal, translated in the West with my teacher, and this kind of giving over of so much autonomy to the teacher in the first place is deeply problematic to me, and has obviously, because we naturally want to find the solutions from another person. I mean, many of us at points sometimes would love to have a benevolent parent figure guiding us in our life. Wouldn't that be wonderful if there could be that way? So these kind of problems are going deep. I mean, they're going deep in general society, in our wish for authority, as much as we are defined in the modern spirit through our wish for democracy, self-autonomy, individual rights. We're deeply ensconced still, I think, in just a wish to have someone tell us the answers. Of course, it's an easy way, isn't it? Even for me, it was very much someone who enjoys taking self-responsibility for myself. I'd love to have someone there and who I could trust as my teacher, who I could put all my faith in, and my body and my mind to show me the way. But I don't think there is a teacher like that in the modern era at least, and at least I haven't encountered one yet anyway. And I've done a lot of podcasts and I've liked a lot of people, but I've never met a guru figure yet. Anyway, I'm slightly off track. So what I wanted to talk to you about today particularly was this deep fault line of the way that the Ashtanga system, whether it was or wasn't originally encouraged like that, has been translated outside India. I'm going to say in the West, because obviously Ashtanga is a worldwide phenomenon now, in all continents. But outside India, let's say, in this censoring, often injurious with the adjustments. I mean, certainly that was the case in India for sure. Stopping and gatekeeping, controlling, all these things, they go deep. And this is just one more occurrence of this scenario. It's just one further notch in the Ashtanga bedpost of disappointment and bad stain on the community once again. And as I said, I mean, if we don't sort this stuff out, if we don't address this deep San Andreas fault, the bottom line of our community, of our method, the way that we contextualize and understand the Ashtanga method, it's in danger of becoming extinct. I'd say in the next 10, 15 years, we're not really going to see the phenomenon of Ashtanga yoga that we know now. All teachers are going to be teaching their own kind of thing, branded maybe under Ashtanga yoga, but it's not going to have the same centering, the same universal spirit. I mean, this is another podcast, I think, as well, to talk about the evolution of Ashtanga and what it means to say that Ashtanga is one thing in the first place. Anyways, I get ahead of myself again. So what I wanted to say is that we have to address this. We have to address this and not bicker amongst ourselves, and not call each other to task as not having spoken out before, or you knew first and you didn't say, and or why aren't this senior teacher speaking? It's up to us whether we want to say something or not. And I think they're putting the emphasis on the senior teachers to speak out in the first place is again somewhat in the vein of the original spirit of giving individuals too much power in the first place, that we are on a grassroots level responsible for each other and responsible for the weaker, more vulnerable people within our community. Not the senior teachers, not the teacher in the room necessarily, us as average practitioners, as the little man and woman practitioner who goes to the studio and has, sense of oneself in, not enlightened, but not really, really super vulnerable and falling to pieces. And it's the average person who must also. We all need to step up to this as well, I suppose, as those people in more public spheres. I suppose we could say that they have, to say that one has a responsibility to speak up. I don't know. I'm sure about that, but to be unsure is to debate these things, and to debate these things is why we're here, right? Anyways. What I wanted to come back to the topic again to say is that I thought I'd put it together a little manifesto of my own about what Ashtanga is and isn't. Because the thing is, if we can be clearer about what Ashtanga is, then as possible victims of abuse, whether it's sexual or physical or any kind of mind games, and I've certainly been on the hand of the two last. I've never been, I don't think, any kind of victim of any sexualization from a male or female teacher. I don't think, but certainly mind games and physical adjustments, abuse. Yeah, most of us have been there, and many of us, I think, have unfortunately also have been on the hands of the first, some kind of inappropriate sexual conduct. It's crazy to say and embarrassing to admit, but I think we can say it's probably true. So I thought, one of the problems of being a victim is you don't trust your own judgment, that you're not really clear about whether really what you feel or what you've experienced is right, is wrong, right? And basically, yeah. So we can't expect the victims to speak out. We can't expect the person who's vulnerable to have the confidence necessarily, to have the trust in their own judgment to say, this is wrong, I mean, even the most courageous of us find it difficult to speak out. I mean, for God's sakes, I had a massage once where they were hurting me. They were pressing too hard and I found it hard to speak out. So look, it's really hard to speak up for ourselves, even at the best of times. So we need to be the ones to set the scene, to set the clear scene of what is right and what is wrong. Yeah, which is to say that much of this narrative around Ashtanga, that traditional Ashtanga is taught by over-disciplining people, by calling people out, by strong adjustments, by being really strict with people, by treating people like children, all these things, by stopping people when they want to carry on with no reason or explanation or discussion, just you stop there. Yeah, all these things confuse the context of the Ashtanga class. So the person who's a victim of these things, of course, thinks they're normal because, sadly enough, they are fairly normal. That's the ironic, that's the terrible thing about it. And so they don't trust their own judgment because, it's actually a fairly normalization of the situation. Yeah? Once we can be clear that these things do not belong in the Ashtanga class, then when a person who's vulnerable, when a person who is naturally inclined to be on the other hand of this kind of abuse, to become a victim of this kind of abuse, when that person comes to the room and is often inevitably targeted because it seems that we have a second sense to target the weaker. If we're a predatory nature, we seem to pick out the weaker people to target. Yeah? Of course we do. Then that person will just be able to pick up the mat and go, knowing that it's simply wrong, knowing that they have encountered something which is not belonging in Ashtanga. But if everyone else around them is getting shouted at, it's getting also seemingly the short end of the wedge, to put it mildly, yeah, getting told to stop and be shamed, but maybe those people, they're not getting, they're getting a small part of it, but for the person who's a victim, maybe other stuff is happening as well that the regular person isn't getting as well, right? They're getting somewhat groomed, they're getting over-sexualized adjustments, they're getting harsh adjustments, yeah? But it's fairly normal anyway, and everyone's kind of having a similar experience in the room. Then the person that's having the heightened experience or the extreme experience of that, or something that crosses the line way further, can't trust their own judgment. They can't be expected to pick up the mat and go because they think it's normal, and it's almost inherent if you've had abuse that you're used to it. Not that you seek it, but that it's a normal feeling, a normal situation. And Ashtanga has these deep fault lines in this idea that a strict teacher is a good teacher, that a traditional teacher is one who doesn't allow people to progress unless they've perfected the posture, who's litigious about the small details, who is so committed to the Ashtanga method in its purity that they would shout at the student for getting it wrong, or commands the utmost respect because they are the most committed and have been to Mysore the most times and have themselves put themselves through the ringer to achieve the advanced shapes that need this kind of sacrifice and self-flagellation almost to achieve. And if these kind of aspects permeate the Mysore room from the teacher and the way that they've been taught possibly, because you see, the situation comes, it's a trickle-down effect. If the teacher, and I saw this time again, if the teacher has been treated inappropriately, I would say abused in relationship, then they're only going to come to their own rooms, back to their own classes, and use that kind of experience of teaching that they've had on their students. So as I wrote a post a while back, the abuser inevitably becomes the abused. So here's for my manifesto. I will not categorically stop students. That's number one. I will not just stop you. I will suggest that I will have a debate with you. I will have a discussion with you. If I ever stop people, it's not like through saying you stop there. It's saying, well, maybe you work on this and then we'll come back tomorrow and we'll have another look at it. What do you think? So it's a two-way discussion. Or maybe don't do that one and move on to the next one because it's not linear in the first place. The sequence is, as much as we like to magical think our way around this and say, well, the sequence progresses one to the next, So if you can't do this posture, you're not able to do the next posture. That's not true. If you can't do Marichasana D, it doesn't mean you can't do Kapotasana, for example. Just like your body may have an impingement in the hip that stops you because the femur just knocks on the hip socket, the acetabulum, for a Marichasana D, whereas Kapotasana, no problem at all. So it's not linear in the first place. Maybe let's move you on for Marichasana D. You can't do it. Maybe you never will. Carry on and you'll find your sweet spot in the back bends of the second series, for example. Yeah. There's not like this perfectionism in the first place. And I certainly don't stop people. Look, that's waving a flag. It's like a red flag to a bull saying, you stop there. It's annoying as a student. It's like, well, what gives? I've got all the energy. I've come, all this way and spent this money just to be told to stop with no further discussion. It's rude, if nothing else. I could say more about that. It really gets my goat, as we say. Number two. It's a two-way conversation. Everything is a two-way conversation, right? If I suggest something, it's not like you have to do it. Your choice to use my suggestion or use your way of doing it. Yeah, it's not my way or the highway in the Mysore room. There's many options, and ultimately, I'm not inside your body, and you have to use my ideas and assimilate them with your own ideas and what you've been taught, and come up with what feels right for you. Yeah. So that's important because generally it seems that if you don't practice in exactly the way the teacher wants in their room, then you're not welcome. And that's a shame because ultimately I feel that the Mysore room is to hold the space. It's to hold the space for an individual to experience themselves in a supported, freer, experimental, inquiring, reflective way. Yeah, and it would be a shame to cover over that space by saying, well, if you don't experience yourself in the way that I want you to, then, well, you're not really welcome. Okay. 3, a student will not be expected to let go to my physical adjustments. Any kind of pressure that necessitates a student yield because it's forceful in their body, that's not right. Pushing a student further than their body can naturally go is not a way to, in inverted commas, open the body. It's simply not right. It doesn't work. It just stretches people into their joints, i.e. the joints become over flexible, the ligaments and the tendons take the slack, and in the end the student is injured. Time and time again. This happens time and time again. Why are we still adjusting people? Now, don't get me wrong, physical assistance is very, very effective and often therapeutic. But physical assistance, poking people with touching people with one finger, is very different to pushing people with your body weight. People talk of being sat on by their teachers, by being stepped on. All these things, hugely disrespectful, dangerous. They have no place in yoga. Just ridiculous. And I have to say, no other real style of yoga has this penchant for doing this kind of injury to people. Yes, Krishnamacharya adjusted his students, but they were young boys. And you can mold and adjust a young boy's body or young woman's body in the way that you can't do so with an adult. It's just ridiculous. The adjustments have to stop. Adjustments, which is pushing someone with force, they have to stop, in my opinion. This is the main problem in Ashtanga yoga. And it confuses the issue as well because people don't know if it's right or it's wrong or it's abusive well, it's all abusive there. If you're being adjusted this way and you have to give way to a teacher's touch, that to me is abuse. Okay. Where am I? I thought I was on 3, but probably I think I've done 3 and 4 maybe. Number 5. As a student, you will not be called out or told off in my class. I was going to say like a child, but worse than a child. We don't even treat children with such disrespect as I've seen or heard people being relayed, stories that have been relayed to me. Unbelievable, the kind of way that adults have been treated by teachers. I think I have to stop there because so many stories spring to mind of just, how is it that Ashtanga teachers can act this way with their students? 6. As a student, you'll be the decider. You will be in the position of power to decide how much of the postures you want to do, how little maybe you want to do that day. Yeah, you won't have to do your full practice. You won't have to do all the postures. If you feel any pain in a posture, leave it for today. You don't have to do the drop backs if you don't feel the energy or if your back is hurting, right? You could choose to miss a posture if you're injured and need to give your body a break in that thing. It's your choice. And again, one would hope it's a democracy these days that we talk about it together as a teacher, and that the teacher is there to support your choices. Yeah. 7. You'll not be penalized. You will not be penalized or made to feel bad for not turning up, nor will you be penalized or excluded or given the cold shoulder or ignored for going to another teacher's workshop or anything like that. Yeah. It's like you have to commit to me and this group. And if I hear or understand you've been anywhere else, then I'll ignore you. These kind of cliques and situations apparently are recurring up to this day. I don't think it's getting better, to be honest. I think maybe it's getting worse. I'm reluctant to say. Maybe this will be the wake-up call we need. Yeah? So, number 9. I will try my best not to be perceived as any outside authority. Certainly not on your life, but even maybe your practice. And this is a difficult one because obviously as a student, you want to come to a teacher who knows more than you. You don't want me to be there going, well, I don't know. I don't know what you should do. What do you think you should do? So there's a happy medium, isn't there, between saying, look, try this. I can see that this could work for you. Yeah. And saying, look, this is the way you do it. And making it patently clear that if you don't do it that way, then, well, I'm not going to come and help you again, or I'm just going to completely ignore you, or I'm going to punish you, even giving you a harsh adjustment, which apparently happens. Again, I'm kind of beyond words that this kind of conduct happens, but, it's just, at the end of the day, I think we have to recognize that it's just human beings. Like, we're all just human beings. Even though we're doing yoga, doesn't make us suddenly become yogic just because of the fact that we're doing a movement that we call yoga. That's up for grabs. It's like, it depends on how you approach it. Just performing the postures doesn't inherently do anything to oneself. In fact, I would say in many occasions, performing these yoga postures, because of the intense stimulation on the spine, actually stirs things up more in ourselves. Unless we are able to ground and contextualize the potency of spinal stimulation in the asanas, it can actually destabilize our minds and our emotions. Especially as a teacher, I think, if you're doing this strong, intense practice and then you're immediately getting up and you're trying to help people and you're already in this state of somewhat stirred up emotional instability, say through creating open space in your asana practice, which is to destabilize yourself to a certain degree, right? right? To think again, to think afresh, then it is in some ways a recipe for a perfect storm, which is another the logistical thing I mentioned in other places is that, well, practice later. Don't practice before you teach, although that was a traditional way, because you're probably not the best straight after you've popped up and finished your practice to start helping other people. And you need to be patient, and you need to have the right head on your shoulders to deal with loads of different people and loads of different energies. Yeah, it's not easy. 10. My aim is to make sure that students feel empowered, that they feel that they're in control, that they feel strong, that they feel confident, that they feel supported to practice, and in such a manner that they feel that they know what they're doing, that they feel safe, strong, confident, in charge, all those things. I think we can engender that spirit in people. Yeah, I think we can, rather than making them feel that they need us to practice, otherwise they can't be trusted to practice on their own. And sadly enough, of course, it's a business model, isn't it? Because a good business model would say, well, make yourself absolutely how do you say essential. There's another word for it, isn't there? Indisposable as a teacher, that the student needs you. They need you to tell them when to do the next posture. They need you to adjust them in that posture that they're working on. No, they don't. They need to be helped and supported and given the space. But that isn't the aim, surely. And the early students went to Mysore and they practiced with a month or two with Patabi Joyce, and they came back and they practiced on their own for the rest of the year, which is not to say that we shouldn't regularly go now to a modern yoga shala, because, well, it's great to have that opportunity. But nevertheless, the daily practice with a teacher and the fact that you have to come to that community daily, I think might be too much, and it might stop us claiming the independent around our practice that we really need, that it is a personal thing, that it is a private struggle, that it is partly doing something on our own, under our own steam, and being challenged by feeling doubtful and unsure at certain points, and deciding to try something, and then it working out or not working out, and then trying something else. All this is in the spirit of discovery and getting greater confidence. Also that you can make mistakes and it's okay. Yeah, and you have your victories from trying something as well. Yeah, and all those have to be done on oneself. If it's just all done by the teacher, then it kind of defeats the purpose, right? And of course, finally, of course, as a teacher, my wish is to be treated somewhat respectfully as a teacher in the room, right? Like, I mean, I think people often assume that, well, they'll come to my class and the way I talk will just mean that I'm holding this wishy-washy space, as we say, where they can just kind of do whatever they want, and I'll just be there just saying great or something. And it's like, well, yes, I'll always support the person. I'll always make you feel good, and I'll always make you feel empowered. But of course, I mean, there has to be some framework around the teaching, some framework around the method, and being clear about the method of Ashtanga is that, well, you've got this thing called vinyasa, and it helps in regulated, structured movement to get you into the understanding of your diaphragm, and the diaphragm connects the body to the mind, and well, that's one fundamental kind of building block or tenet of Ashtanga yoga as a method. And so there's certain aspects of the method which are really important to convey if the person is interested in learning the Ashtanga method. And well, if they're not, then sometimes as a teacher you have to say, well, look, it looks like you're interested in just doing your own flow. Well, the Ashtanga class is probably not the best place to do that, because you could do that flow in a vinyasa flow class with music and surrounded by other people in a more of a supportive context for that it will be much more enjoyable for you and beneficial, right? So again, it's the way you say things, right? It's the way that you relate to individuals, right? And I mean, to that end, of course, not every person is going to resonate with you and become your student, but doesn't mean that you have to have this fight with people as well. Like it's like this kind of, well, this is what Ashtanga is, and if you're not willing to submit to the authority of Ashtanga, then you're not really an Ashtangi or an Ashtanga student. Again, I come back to that that fault line of the strict traditional teacher, which is, I don't know, did it get started very early on? The early spirit of the early teachers, the David Swensons, David Williams, these Nancy Gilgoffs, these teachers practicing in Maui, Danny Paradise, they were all chilled out. They were all fun, kind of experimental, kind of open hippies. They weren't kind of like litigious. You haven't perfected that posture, stop there, all that kind of thing. So that spirit of censorship, of shaming people, of stopping and controlling people's practices, that crept in later. That wasn't in the early teachings, I'm pretty sure of it, although the strong adjustments were, of Patabi Joyce. Yeah. And that fault line, maybe it was the seeds were there somewhere. That fault line has gradually grown stronger and stronger, and it just seems to be erupting. Or is that what you say about a fault? The earthquake seems to be happening with increasing regularity, and then what happens? The fallout of the earthquake, the aftermath is all this infighting and bickering again. Or you should be speaking up, and you should hold your peace, and you've tried to blame, your victim blaming, so shut up. Look, we're destroying ourselves as an Ashtanga community, and it's a practice that I've practiced since I was 19, that I love it, and there's so much good around it. Of course, there's the bad as well. Everything has its dark side, but there's so much good around it, and can we keep evolving it and trying to get less of the bad and more of the good in our community and our teaching, without competing against each other to be the most right. I don't know. Anyways, I hope you've experienced. I hope you've felt some kind of levity or clarity or positivity coming from me today. And I do hope that it hit the right kind of notes, because these matters are sensitive. And if you've ever been a victim, as all of us, most of us, I think, have at some point of our life, at least, if not many times, it's a horrible place to be in, and it's very unempowered, and it's very hard, and you doubt yourself, and you these, again, to say it once again, we can't expect the people to speak up that are the people that are abused. This happens to need to come from all of us by addressing the very nature of Ashtanga, what it stands for and what it doesn't stand for, and to keep trying to just be respectful of each other as well, though, because we all make mistakes in the way that we say things. I've probably made loads of mistakes in the way that I've said things here, but it doesn't mean that we try and take the best of things and not focus maybe on the worst of things, or respectfully point out that, well, one could have said something in a better way, rather than just making, because I have it as well. People often say things that they cut to the bone, and then they make you stop wanting to speak out at all, especially if you're a sensitive kind of person who maybe has very opposite or very thoughtful kind of views. It stops those people speaking out altogether. Only the thick-skinned people who are confident to shout the loudest end up speaking up, because people are so afraid of being, as soon as they stick their head up, of being shot down. And we need discussion. That's the main thing. We need polite, tolerant discussion to go forward from this. Now, anyways, that's me for today, and I hope to come back with, a slightly more positive, upbeat note next week with a guest, of course. And take care of yourself out there, and let me know what you think. And of course, please point out my blind spots, and please comment if you found any of it useful, or have any other thoughts as to how we could go forward. We've acknowledged it now. We're going to deal with the fallout, and then we're going to move on, and we're going to move forward together, and hopefully stronger. All right, guys. Well, that's me for today, and look forward to speaking to you again next week. Bye for now.